I have a list of tips and tricks if you want.
Oh, I am absolutely keen for tips and tricks.
Yeah.
I think I've covered off some of these here, but I've got one of my. I found a whole bunch of lack of reliability if you run long wires off GPIOs. So be them ESP
Mhm.
devices or what have you. So basically, if you're running a cable to a sensor or a reed switch or something, and it's quite a long run, you're effectively creating an aerial. And my biggest problem was that I couldn't catch. I had one running to the post box, and it just never worked half the time. I could never fix it. I could not fix it. And I tried all sorts of things. And then I found the easiest way, and it was like, oh, why didn't you think of this earlier to fix it? Was basically you just run a relay. So you buy them little blue relays that are on. So off to AliExpress again, get a bunch of relays for a few quid. So the circuit, if you like, is that opens the post box is run via a relay. So as soon as the reed switch or the little micro switch at the post box fits, it's just completing the circuit on the relay, and then the relay is next to the Pi or the ESP device, and it
Mm.
just. So I would just sort of say to people, if you're running long wires off GPIO, dragons be there because things usually go wrong. We did the coving for cabling. Running wired cabling makes such a difference to your network, particularly if you're streaming music, particularly to the reliability of it. Don't name Tasmotor devices. If I could start again, have we all done I've got this Tasmotor device and I'm going to call it the, light by the telly or whatever it is. And you're just like, no, call
Right.
it light, call it Tasmotor device one, Tasmotor device two. And then you just change the name, in the customize in Home Assistant, just because you end up moving stuff or you reconfigure rooms and then you got this Tasmoder device and then it's really, really difficult to untasmoder this because there's just history everywhere within Home Assistant. So if you're buying a
Yeah.
load of devices, don't call them what they are. If you see what I mean? That one's so I've still got I've got one in the kitchen that says it's the conservatory light thing. You just change it at the UI level and that's it. Leave everything. Don't know if you guys have got caught on that one.
I've just reconfigured a room. I've moved a TV from one bedroom to another bedroom. And I'm in the process of just all the entities. I've renamed the thing in Home Assistant, and now I've got different entity names, which means all my old automations are broken, which is not that they're relevant anymore. So yeah, I'm not sure. The thing that I find is a potential solver to that is the device IDs in Home Assistant.
Yeah.
So before, Home Assistant has always had entity IDs, but now that we're starting to move to more device IDs, there are ways that you can actually trigger things based on the device ID as opposed to the entity ID. So I could go in some situations, and whatever I've renamed the entity ID to, it doesn't matter because in the Home Assistant, I've got the device ID. It
That
doesn't work in all cases, like condition blocks and trigger blocks, it still requires the entity ID for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I think that's one way around it.
Just and to play devil's advocate a little bit here, I think it's also that breakage might actually be a good thing depending on what it is you're doing, right? So for example, if you move a device from A to B, I probably don't want those automations to come over, right?
Mm.
Again, depending on let's say it's tied to a motion sensor or it's like that's still in that previous room, right? Or there's an automation that says, hey, you know what? Turn this light on at a certain time, and this device is a light switch or something like that, right? Or a smart switch that's connected to a lamp. Again, a lot of times that reset might not be a bad thing because I've gotten caught in that as well, right? Where I've sat there and I was like, oh, why is this turning on right now? And I was like, oh, right, because it used to be in that room and then I moved it and so on and
that
so forth, right? So uh, again, there's pros and cons to both, right? I'm not saying one
Mm.
way is right or one way is wrong. It's just pick your battle on which one you want to do. Do you want to rename entities every time you want to do it and recreate your automations, or not do that and risk having rogue automations, right? And I'm very guilty of those rogue automations as I move
edge.
around. Yeah, everything ends up becoming edge cases, right? At that point, whereas Now it's pull it out and then everything is, as I need it, right? So if I know something isn't happening, it's because I haven't actually programmed it into happen yet, right? So
yeah, I just think I suppose the main point here in terms of tips is we all get so excited at putting this stuff in, and then you forget that 5 years goes by really, really quickly, and we reconfigure our houses. And you're just like, it's like one of those. Why didn't I think of that at the time? Why didn't I do that? And that's just one that's sort of bugged me. We've covered the use rules in Tasmotor, particularly for energy monitoring, only for you to pick events. That's the one that I've used so many times now to just catch events. If you've got a plug that monitors energy, use the rules to fire MQTT rules, and then you'll catch, my television switches or my soundbar switches perfectly, and that was a real bugbear for me. I don't know if you guys have used the remote SSH add-in into Visual Studio Code. So I know that this is a sort of other things I thought of ideas was we could do not Alcoholics Anonymous, but Home Assistant Anonymous, and that one day you should do a session where like we go to people's log files and we kind of debug them, so I don't know, do you I have every so often when I quote unquote haven't got anything to do, I will go into the Home Assistant log file and start working through some of the issues that are there, because there are always issues with it. But I use Visual Studio Code Remote SSH to do that, because it's a really, really good tool. So it always sort of is updating for you. So and I use VS Code Remote SSH for other stuff, but it's fantastic. So you actually, it just uses Remote SSH to go in, and then you can edit the files and you can look at the folders. It's really, really useful. But one of my sort of in my setup, I've got like a VS Code with my repo for my Home Assistant, and then I've got another instance which is looking at the log file. So when I do I do the commit, and then I can watch the log file just load up as Home Assistant comes alive, and I can see what I've messed up, go and fix that, and do another commit to it. You kind of get the idea, but it's just been a really useful sort of working environment, and we should, so I often think it's great. Some of the stuff in the log file is really esoteric, and I've spent hours looking at it. I'm sure you do, but you just think, if I had like everybody on this podcast looking at my log file, I'd get it fixed in minutes, So we should have a collective log file bashing sort of thing.
That's right.
Some things in there that I think will never be fixed, though. Like, the cloud service is taking too long to load, or
yeah.
But I mean, to your point, Alastair, I do the exact same, right? Like even during the holidays and stuff like that, when I get a couple of days, I just did that this past December, right? And get a few minutes and like, all right, let's see what's going on here, and then start cleaning up stuff, right? And a lot of times I'll find too, like when I make a change again, because I'll be looking at the log files as I either add entities or anything like that, or make any changes even. I look even when I do stuff on like Lovelace and stuff like that. It's just a habit now. And I'll just, read out the logs and be like, oh, actually this is, this is broken, whatever. Right. But I actually really like the new, what's it called? Repair, in Home Assistant, right? Because if there's actually something that you're like, that it's like, hey, you should really do this. Typically those things are in there. Right. Again, it might not be specific to your, or it's specific to your instance, but it's not like, hey, you typed this wrong or something like that, right? But the bigger things are typically in there, which I like. So
yeah, I do. It's kind of, you can see it's the direction that it's got to go. If we're going to make this thing mainstream, we would have this kind of feedback loop of things that are, that it knows are going wrong, as much as we can communicate back to it. Things are going wrong. So I recently had to, as part of my Uptime Kuma, the thing I got frustrated with is, you've got devices turning off and turning on all the time. So if you think about my music room setup, where I've got these Pis, as soon as the house goes empty, they all get turned off. And Uptime Kuma would go, and it would start firing off errors, which is of course useless. And then I found there was another repo of someone who had basically reverse engineered the API calls, and it exposed them as REST. So as soon as Home Assistant turns off that Pi, it then fires off the rest calls to Uptime Kuma to actually turn or pause those devices. So I have this things coming on. I think that will come mainstream functionality if you look in the repo for Kuma that they're looking to do. I think they've just added the maintenance bit for it, but it's not there yet. So I really wanted to use Kuma, but the reality of it is if you're using Home Assistant, you're turning stuff off all the time, and therefore it's going to start throwing errors. So that was my way around it, which actually meant I had to, the API only ran on 64-bit just because of a load of dependencies that weren't there in 32-bit, and my instance was 32-bit. So I had this painful, oh no, I'm going to have to upgrade this, So I bit the bullet, and I thought I haven't rebuilt this for years. So I used the, everybody used the Google Backup add-in. It's really, really useful and documented. And to be fair, although there was a few things I'd forgotten, and that there's always stuff that you've forgotten, but very recently, so I switched it into 64-bit and brought it back up. And there was I documented it, but, perhaps everybody should also go through rebuild your Home Assistant. How confident are you that you have every config that you need to actually, sort of flatten that machine and build it up again? I got it back within a day, I know it's bits and bobs, but I was quite pleased. So the restore process isn't too bad.
Yeah, that is a good. I mean, if you can spin it, get a second device to restore the backup, right, and just flip. But again, that would be ideal, but that could cost you more money, right? So
yeah,
what type of device you have and stuff like that running it.
I only had one Pi 4, so what I actually did was I took the SSD out, got an SD card, micro SD card in, and built that, and then restored that and saw what happened, if you like. And I knew then within that I got most stuff back, so that gave me the confidence then to just flatten the SSD and do it. So, but yeah, nice. Unfortunately, I only had one Pi 4, so I was a bit stuck with that one. Another one I learned was that I don't know what the percentage of people that use Spotify, but we have the Spotify family account.
Yep.
So on my integrate, you actually get 5 accounts. It depends how many people in your house, but that for us left one spare account. So I use that for all the Home Assistant. So originally I said I integrated all the music. I then integrated it within Home Assistant. So you use Spotcast and the Spotify integration, what have you. So Home Assistant controls all of those, but it was a good way of not polluting your own personal Spotify sort of list of usage, if you like, by, so I think people forget there is a spare, well, it depends how many people in the household, but you get 5 accounts with Spotify.
Yeah.
So you can use another one to do that. That was another good one for me.
I wish I'd done that. My Spotify account is ruined with children's lullabies and that now. So
yeah.
Well, that was exactly what I was trying to avoid.
Yeah. Well, I have a separate one for the car because, again, what used to happen is my wife would be listening to something here, and then I'd try to listen in the car, and again, because only one can be active at any given time, right? So it's
yeah. So it works well. So basically, I have a music page, of which, for the whole family, we have playlists, radio, Spotify radio or whatever. So anyone could just come down, pick what they want, choose which zone they want to play it in, and just play it, whatever, and it just works.
Yeah.
So, nice. but without, your Spotify, when you get your thing at the end of the year of what you've listened to, I haven't listened to too many weird things.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.